All right. So, hi everyone. Welcome to our Y.E.S, our education series. My name's Amy. I work with the North Suburban YMCA. It's my pleasure to welcome, we have Vicki from the Northbrook Bank and Trust, and we have Jesse from Wintrust Wealth and Management. Today, they'll be speaking on investment fraud and helping us understand and to become more savvy with illegal activities involving deceptive investors. And we'll be able to take some questions at the end of the talk. And the talk will last about 1 hour. And yeah, the YMCA, our Y Education series, is free and open to the public. However, as a nonprofit, we're always open to taking donations. And please visit our website at www.nsymca.org. And again, we'd like to thank both our speakers, both Vicki and Jesse, for joining us today. And with that, I'll let you guys take it away. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vicki. Thank you so much for having us today. I am a branch manager for two of the Wintrust locations. I'm located out of the Northfield branches. So I go between two branches and I work with Jesse with when we do have questions on investments or clients that would benefit from them. We direct them to Jesse. And that's a little about me, Jesse.
Thanks, Vicki. My name is Jesse Stabile. I'm a certified financial planner at Wintrust Wealth Management. We are a subsidiary of the Wintrust Financial Group. And so Vicki is part of our Wintrust Bank division. I'm considered part of Wintrust Wealth Management and specifically Wintrust Investments. But Wintrust as a whole tries to be a resource for the community, whether it's banking, investments, trust, estate, a variety of different solutions available. And that's why we're excited to talk about the topic today. I'll share my screen here, what we consider money smart for older adults. Let's make sure that you can see that okay. Does that look good?
Looks
Hopefully.
good to me.
Okay, perfect. um, as I said, just some brief disclosures. I am in the financial industry, so we disclose a lot of things each and every day through emails, et cetera. But the opinions that are going to be expressed today are really directly from me. While I'm part of Wintrust Investments, I'm going to give you, my 2 cents on the variety of investment scams, frauds, things we need to be thinking about, and hopefully a few stories that you can relate to that will help you make sure you're not a victim of some of these things here in the future as well. And I want to start with a brief story because we're going to talk about investment fraud, which is a really broad topic, right? There's a lot of things that go into that. But I had a story relayed to me somewhat recently here that I thought kind of fit here. And there was a specific investor, his name was Rick Gurin. And I think if you brought that name up to someone, Rick Gurin, even if they were in the financial industry, it wouldn't really stick out. But Rick was friends and investors with Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. And those names usually ring a bell a little bit more. Warren Buffett, especially, one of the most famous investors really out there, part of Berkshire Hathaway. Rick Gurin was a partner with them when they started Berkshire Hathaway and was right in from the ground floor of that company and the investment strategies that they implemented and did over decades. But you don't hear Rick's name as often for really a specific reason. And what was interesting is Rick was part of that group. Once again, Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, they were growing Berkshire Hathaway in the 60s and 70s, doing very well for themselves. But Rick took a different approach compared to Charlie and Warren in that Rick used what's called margin and was basically loaning money to try and juice up his returns. And essentially, he was being a bit greedy because he wanted to get rich and he wanted to do it quickly if he could. Charlie and Warren, on the other hand, knew that they were going to be able to grow their wealth over time, but they also understood it could take decades to do so. Well, they were investing through the 60s and 70s, and in the 1980s, some very difficult market conditions led to Rick specifically having to liquidate his investments to pay off his loans. Once again, he was using margin, which meant he was borrowing money to try and earn more. He ended up having to sell all of his Berkshire Hathaway to be able to pay back some of those loans that he was subject to in the 80s, and he never got to share in the future growth that Warren Buffett and Charlie did over the next number of years. And when you talk to Charlie and Warren about it, they ultimately say, look, Rick was just as smart as us. He just was in a hurry to get rich. He didn't have the time. And then once again, eventually he was essentially greedy. And I think that's where a lot of these investment frauds come in, is that someone is maybe in a hurry to make some money. Maybe they're getting a little greedy with their investments, and these scammers or other people can come in and feed into that to get someone to make some decisions they really shouldn't. Once again, I hope to cover a broad variety of topics today to help you understand that and see what we should be looking out for. One of the first things I'm going to start with is some of the designations and certifications that are out there for financial professionals that we should be aware of. There are a variety of what's considered a designation, or once again, a certification that can lead someone to believe this financial advisor, this professional, is going to have the tools, the competency to be able to provide good financial advice. But unfortunately, there are also designations out there that don't necessarily have the same requirements that you might expect. So some of these designations someone can get are maybe a weekend where they spend a few $100 and they're able to put a few letters behind their name. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a certified financial planner, or a CFP. That is one of the more respected designations in the industry because it does take a significant amount of time. And there's a rigorous exam, as well as requirements to even be a CFP, to be able to provide advice in the industry. Some of the other designations that I think are probably good to look out for, meaning these are usually positive ones, that CFP, a certified financial planner, a CFA is a certified financial analyst, and a CPA, a certified public accountant. Those are probably the three biggest that you can feel pretty confident they have some good competency in the details they need to have to provide advice. There's usually some sort of exam, or it's not an overnight type of class that allows you to get a designation. And so that means if you do work with someone, and we see some of these designations that are senior specialists or maybe retirement specialists, it doesn't mean that it's bad if you don't recognize it, but it does mean you should maybe take a second and find out exactly what that designation is. Is it difficult to get? Or is it more you pay a few $100 and you're able to put it behind your name? So we want people to be aware there, because once again, that starts to bring this level of trust. When you say, "Oh, well, they said they, were competent in this area," you can make an assumption. You do just want to take a second, and that's what we're going to talk about today too. Is what we just consider red flags, things that should perk your interest when you hear this. It doesn't mean automatically something is bad, but it does mean we should be paying attention. Ponzi schemes are probably something we've all heard of. And that's because the term a Ponzi scheme started back in the 1920s. I thought it was interesting. The Ponzi scheme is named after Charles Ponzi, who back in the 1920s did this first scheme. And he ultimately, and once again, this is 100 years ago now, but he promised 50% returns for investors back then through an international mail coupon type of investment. And I can't imagine, how those conversations went 100 years ago, but he was promising 50% returns over the course of a couple months. And that's ultimately where these Ponzi schemes should really pop out to someone is, as I said earlier, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. That's a great rule of thumb that I'm sure we've all heard. But if someone is promising outsized returns or something that's absolutely zero risk, that should cause those red flags to pop up and say, well, wait a second, how is this going to work? And those Ponzi schemes are ultimately the fraudulent person takes those monies in from someone and then pays it out to other investors and never actually invests the money. But you feel it might be working because you're able to get a bit of money out. It, of course, falls apart eventually. So one of the oldest schemes that are out there, but unfortunately still happening today, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. And as we talk once again broadly, you have just financial advisors in the industry that really don't have the best interests of their clients at heart. And this is where it can get confusing, because just because someone is doing something that isn't in your best interest, it doesn't mean that it's out and out fraud. It can just be highly unethical. And that can mean that they're charging exorbitant fees or trading your account more than they should be, or they have unauthorized trades on the account. Once again, some of this will be considered fraud, but some of it is just very unethical. And so you do want to take a moment and understand if you're working with someone or talking about working with someone, what are they trying to accomplish? Are they asking you the right questions? A lot of the things we're going to talk about today will hopefully pop up some red flags for you because, once again, it's not always cut and dry that they stole money. It can be they really just aren't acting in your best interest, which is unfortunate in the industry. Now, sometimes this happens because a financial professional starts to affiliate themselves with someone that's in a trustful position. And that's what we consider affinity fraud. And that's where they'll associate themselves with maybe a church, a religious organization of some sort, um, maybe a military organization, or some sort of institution that has some trust behind it, right? So they're kind of affiliated with it, even though they may not actually have anything to do with it. And we do see that in those, probably the two biggest are kind of the military organizations and religious organizations. There are some very well known companies out there that do have a much closer relationship. I think the big ones I think of are USAA, right? It's not actually a division of the U.S. military in any way, but they do have a bit of a connection there. And an investment firm called Thrivent also has a stronger religious connection that I think, once again, that's not a bad thing at all. It just means they do actually have some sort of affiliation there. But other people will try and latch on to that. And so you do want to make sure if someone is connected to some organization, you'd want to talk to that organization and say, are you familiar with this person? Do they work with other people here? How did you get connected with them? And if you start to get answers that don't line up, there's that red flag. Well, wait, why is this person associating with this organization when it really doesn't seem like they are? And that's because they're trying to build that trust to potentially have some sort of fraud there. Another really broad topic is just internet fraud in general. They kind of nickname it the .con, right? It's simple, catchy there. But this could be a variety of things, from a simple, email from someone you don't know and you click on a link unexpectedly, to sometimes a month or years long scam that can happen as well. There was a very interesting story just a couple months ago in the Wall Street Journal. There was a 75-year-old widowed man. He was a little lonely as he lost his wife a few years earlier. He ended up being on LinkedIn, which is a professional networking site, and got a message from what looked to be a young Chinese woman who started to express some interest in knowing him further, and clearly felt like there was an opportunity here to connect. Unfortunately, the elder man wasn't in a great headspace at the time and started to fall for this woman that messaged him on LinkedIn. And after a couple months, they started to connect more and more. She ended up talking about some investment opportunities that were more international in nature, but was able to do similar to a Ponzi scheme, have him deposit some funds, have some returns, and he started to feel very comfortable with this person, even though they had never met in real life. And it's a great story if you're ever on that website or read that paper. I won't get into all the details there, but the point being is, over the course of a few months, that individual ended up losing over 700, almost $800,000, because he was convinced this person was here to help him, was going to come out to the U.S. and live with him for the future. And obviously, he had some devastating things happen to him there. And so it doesn't really matter how old you are or what the scenario is or what website it is. These fraudsters are out there online. And anytime you're looking at something online and it's talking about investments, especially if it's not a reputable site, you need to be careful, right? If it's a person you've never met, you don't know who that person is on the other line. In fact, in that story, not probably a huge surprise, it wasn't even a woman. It was this collection of internet scammers, across the country. So you need to be very, very careful online, because even if it looks like it's someone an email from someone um, by no means do you know for certain. So you want to make sure you connect with that person in the best way you can. And lastly, this is especially true for seniors here, is the sale of annuities. most of the time, I'm a certified financial planner. I talk about all these different types of investments with clients and customers of the bank all day. You hear the word annuity, and typically that alone will cause a red flag for someone, right? And that's for good reason because annuities have had a variety of issues over the last 10, 20 plus years. But unfortunately, it is an area that's ripe for seniors to be taken advantage of because there are features of annuities that are beneficial for the age group, but they can also have a lot of problems, whether it's high fees or lack of liquidity, meaning you can't touch the funds for an extended period of time, or huge charges to make changes in the future. So that product in particular, once again, is very reasonable for it to raise a red flag. And it doesn't mean that it's bad, but it does mean you need to be extra careful in understanding what this product is. Why is this person recommending that I look at it? Does it really fit my goals and what I'm trying to accomplish? And unfortunately, I've seen individuals who end up buying an annuity from someone and they could be in their 70s ish and they end up buying 15, sometimes 20-year annuities, which I would imagine we can all be on the same page that that's probably not appropriate. I don't know many investors that are looking to lock up money into their 90s, for specific reasons within an annuity. So, once again, we want to make sure that you understand exactly what these products are before you get into it. One of the ways for us to start to understand the particular advisor or financial professional is something called Broker Check. So, this is a website provided by FINRA, which is a regulatory body of the investment industry. And you can see the website on there, brokercheck.finra.org. And you could just Google Broker Check. It should bring you right there. But this is a chance to put in the name or firm of an advisor or financial professional that maybe you're talking to or working with, and to be able to get some history on them in terms of how long have they worked where they work, what licenses do they have, are they licensed in my state, a variety of pieces there. It's looking at what we call in the industry their U4. So that's looking at essentially, once again, the history of them in the industry. What we kind of joke around about sometimes with my colleagues is if there is something that an advisor or financial professional did that harmed either a firm or a client, and there was actually some sort of legal proceeding brought about, they can get what we consider a mark, but it's a red dot that happens on that broker check report. So you look up the person, shows their history, there'll be a red dot on there, and it'll allow you to see what did this person do that meant something needed to happen to them. Now, maybe it was a misunderstanding between them and their firm, something simple. Maybe it was they misappropriated funds or mislabeled how an investment was going to work, and the client felt that they were wronged and brought about this information to FINRA to get restitution. But we joke around that if their U4 or that broker check starts to look like chicken pox with a bunch of red dots on there, that's a huge red flag. Um, so it is important to understand the history of the person you're working with. Are they brand new in the industry? Have they been working for 20 years? And the other website that's on here is called advisorinfo.sec.gov. Very similar to broker check, but that's for registered investment advisors. We don't have to get into the details in terms of the difference between these two websites, but they do essentially the same thing, provide the ability for you to see the history on an advisor or financial professional. If you're talking to someone who is making themselves out to be an advisor, maybe saying I provide retirement advice or income advice, or I work with seniors on these items, and you can't find them on either of these websites, I won't say that alone, is a problem, but that's a red flag, right? That's a chance to go, I need to understand more about this person's background because they clearly aren't licensed in these areas. So why should I trust them, right? And once again, it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means we need to be aware of it. Okay. The two other websites that you can go to just for some more resources. This is called the North American Securities Administrators Association. This is a chance to contact the regulators in our industry. So maybe you have an issue that you feel is serious enough, you need to bring it to the regulators, either from the advisor or from the firm, right? You feel you've been wronged. you can go to that website to start to bring about your concern, and they'll start an investigation. The CFPB is also an area that will allow you to get to know more information about your financial advisor, things you should be thinking about when you're maybe interviewing or talking to an advisor. There are a variety of websites that are available for this. Um, the CFPB website will talk about some of those designations that are out there. For better or worse, there are 10, 15, 20 plus designations that are out there with all these different levels of expertise based on someone's situation. And sometimes these levels of expertise are in an area that may not be appropriate for you or something you're talking about, which would then lead you to say, is this the right advisor for me? Right. If someone has a social security designation, meaning they have the training and tools to provide social security advice, that might be perfect for someone who's 62, 67. But if they're 35 or maybe even 75 or 80, do they need to necessarily have the claiming strategies for social security at that point, right? So you want to line up those designations with what's going to make sense for you. um, there's a variety of safeguards we want to take when it comes to some of the fraud that can happen out there. um, it's not necessarily huge news, but if there's a stranger that's starting to offer you advice, we need to be careful. That's a red flag. And the difficult part is the reason seniors are preyed upon is because there's a variety of ways to come across as a trustworthy person. Some of which we talked about, right? Maybe they feel like they're affiliated with a group that you do trust. Maybe they have some sort of letters behind their name or credentials that make you feel like, hey, this person seems to know what they're talking about. All of those just need to be verified if you start to talk to someone who you have no idea who they are. But it's often why, more often than not, someone wants to be introduced to an advisor or a financial professional that has had interactions with someone they know, right? Maybe their friend or family member works with them. Um, there's no perfect system, but if you're affiliated with a bank like Wintrust or Chase or Citibank, there's at least an institution behind them that seems to have given them some trust. So you do hope that there's something beyond just them telling you to trust them. But even through that, you want to take your time. Where investors get in trouble is they start to feel some sort of pressure to move forward with something. If there is a situation where maybe there's a solution or a product, but there's a lot of pressure to say, look, you need to do this now, right? We need to do this today, tomorrow, this week. That right there should be a red flag where, once again, doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but it should say we need to take a second and think about this. And the best example is really happening today. There's a variety of solutions out there that are affected by interest rates, whether it's CDs or other fixed products that are out there. Interest rates are starting to fall, and they've been high now for a year, year and a half. But some of these products are going to drop in interest rates. And I've had conversations with clients and customers of the bank where I say, look, here's what this is at today, but next week we may know it's going to drop. And I am very careful to say, look, we're not going to make any rash decisions. We don't need to be pressured into anything, but it is also good to know that, maybe these numbers will change in a week, and the solution will look a little different. So that's why I say, as we talk through some of these safeguards or different pieces, this isn't the end all be all. Oh, I felt pressured. I can't work with this person, but it should raise that red flag. And it really brings us back to what I said earlier. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If someone is promising outsized returns, but we can only get it this week, well, okay, I think I'll wait till next week and see how things shake out, because I would be concerned about that pressure to make a decision that quick. And once again, this is happening today. And it happens with institutions that you would think you would trust. So just over the summer here, there was a advisor from Morgan Stanley out in California who ultimately was doing a Ponzi scheme with his clients. So he was taking money in, not investing it, spending it himself, and giving it back to some clients if they asked. And it was to the tune of over $1 million that he was able to fraudulently get from clients. And he did that from 2020 to 2022. And he got sentenced here just over the summer. But that's an advisor with, I think, a pretty well-known company, Morgan Stanley, that you would generally expect to trust. And I by no means think Morgan Stanley is a bad company. I think they have a spectacular amount of great advisors, but it doesn't matter the company. It is the advisor themselves who can still act fraudulently. So that's why you need to take your time, understand what's being invested, and understand, once again, the credentials of this person you might be working with. What comes with that is if someone is offering some sort of investment opportunity or a solution of some sort, ask for it in writing. If they refuse to give you something in writing, that's a red flag. If they refuse to email you something, that's a red flag. Once again, it doesn't mean that it's bad. Some red flags are bigger than others, but you do at that point need to say, well, they don't want to provide me any written information. I need to get someone else's opinion, a friend, a family member. Maybe you have multiple advisors that you're familiar with. You can start to talk to them. And I think a key piece of that is if the person offering this solution doesn't want you to bring in other people. Oh, you don't need to talk to them. Oh, they're not going to know what we're talking about. If they're uncomfortable with that, that's a red flag, right? We need to be careful of that, because that person may understand that if you involve more people, things are going to fall apart because they're not acting maybe in your best interest. So that's why getting other people involved can be helpful. Some of those in senior ages start to need a bit more help with their finances beyond just looking for investments, but maybe paying bills, or organizing where funds are, or any number of items just as they get a little older and maybe they're widowed or whatever the case may be. Some financial advisors will offer to start to take over those responsibilities for the client, and that can be a big issue there as well. And unfortunately, this can even happen with financial advisors that have had relationships with clients for 5, 10, 15 plus years. So they can have built in quite a bit of trust, but something changes either in the financial advisor's life or maybe the relationship with the client. They now have potentially what's considered power of attorney over their accounts, or they get added on to accounts. Those are red flags that you should not have a financial professional be added on to accounts. For the most part, that is usually uh, not something compliance departments want, and that does create some additional risks. And once again, unfortunately, we've got stories, recent ones here, of this exactly happening. There was an advisor out in California, again, not picking on California, maybe it's just a big enough state we see some issues out there. Um, but one advisor in particular had built up a variety of clients over the years, and 9 of them had given him access to their accounts, help pay bills, manage things a little bit easier, maybe make changes to the account without needing signatures. And what all seems like convenience and something nice for the advisor to do ultimately was able to scam over 2.25 million from these clients, whether that was from direct withdrawals or overcharging them, but clearly some significant fraud happening as he took over 2 million from these 9 clients. He was in a position of trust. So that is where you do want to bring in these other parties, people that you have a reason to trust beyond the advisor, family members, friends, hopefully someone that you feel like you can have at your back. One of the things that can be done, because it is not unusual for an elder to maybe not have family that's nearby. Maybe they don't have family they can trust or friends that they can trust. They've been working with a financial advisor for a period of time. You can have what's considered a bank trust department become a custodian for an elder client. So that's a bigger conversation. But the point there would be is if a senior is in a position where they start to need some financial help making decisions, once again paying bills, that's a bigger discussion that you want to involve multiple people in, and be wary of adding your financial advisor to an account. Some other quick pieces that I think fit. We want to make sure that if you're working with someone, if they're asking for funds, they're not asking for a check in their name. That's definitely a big red flag. Almost, I can't think of a financial professional that would accept funds in their name. It would be made out to a company, it would be made out to an institution of some sort. but you wouldn't have it make it out to an individual. So once again, someone says, oh, just make it out to me, I'll put it away. That's a big red flag. Holding on to documents are typically a good move. I'm sure if you've had an accountant or a CPA that you've maybe worked with, typically they talk about retaining documents for about 7 years. That's a good rule of thumb. Based on how much paper mailings can go out on investments, that might be quite a big pile you start to build up. So, it's up to you as far as how long you want to keep these statements. But what happens, once again, sometimes with older adults, is that they get told one thing and then they forget, or they thought this was supposed to happen and it went a different way. Or the family member comes in and says, well, what do you mean you don't know what's happening here? You don't have any statements. Maybe you didn't even realize those statements were being emailed or maybe sent somewhere else. If you can get those statements, that'll show you what's happening in an account, which is why it's important to hold on to them. Unfortunately, there are some fraudulent activities that happen because the advisor or the financial professional had those statements and activity things emailed to maybe an email address that doesn't exist or to their own email address, but the client never even notices that things are happening because they're not receiving that information. So you do want to make sure you've got some regular communication happening about your account. And that also includes the conversations that you have with an advisor or financial professional along the way. When I meet with clients myself, I take notes through our conversation, and that gets put into a system so I can remember what we talked about. It's not always easy for us in the industry to even make sure we've got all the notes correct. So we want to take those down. You, as an investor, should also do that because it's very easy to have miscommunications. You thought this was going to happen and something else did. Now, sometimes that just means, you have the advisor and you need to get on the same page better. But sometimes there's fraudulent activity happening, right? We said X was going to happen, but money was lost or the numbers look different. If you have specific notes that say, here's the expectation, that's going to help line things up. So I absolutely recommend writing down and getting things in writing when you can. Beyond some of the fraudulent behavior, there are still just investments in general that we need to be cautious of, whether it's stocks, bonds, annuities, what's considered structured products. There's a variety of different solutions out there, and we don't want to put all those eggs in one basket. When you're working with an advisor, you're going to hope that they're going to take the time to understand your situation, your goals, income, etc. If you are on a single income, maybe of Social Security, you don't have substantial assets, there should be a conversation there about what type of investments should I be looking at? Are high risk stocks really the best way to go? Are we looking to double our money in the next 6 months? Those types of conversations need to happen before any solutions are really brought about. And you do, once again, want to have different pieces, whether it's investments or cash or a variety of different areas. Um, Unfortunately, if there is some sort of fraud happening, it can happen extremely quick. This happened just recently with my son. Now, this thankfully didn't have anything to do with any funds that my son has, but he was playing a game online, and ultimately he clicked a link he shouldn't have. And we didn't connect quick enough, but it was only a couple minutes when that person online was able to get into my son's account. Now, we're talking about a young kid. It's a video game. The items that were lost, were meaningless. But the point there is that it took a couple minutes for that person to get through their scam and do that fraudulent activity. It can happen that fast. My aunt was subject to something like this. She got a call from what was considered a Microsoft help department. She didn't realize her computer wasn't working correctly. I consider my aunt pretty smart, kind of knows what's going on, but they caught her at a moment of weakness, which is often how these frauds start, right? One word or phrase or something's happening that can get someone. So she got this phone call. They ended up getting her to log into the computer, and they ended up taking over the computer and clicking on things, going through her files, trying to get her to log into her bank accounts and things. And it wasn't until I want to say 10 or 15 minutes after that activity was happening that finally someone in the family said, "What are you doing? This should not be happening." But at that point, I know she did have some issues. She needed to solve those things. The point being is, don't let embarrassment of something happening or the fear of what if this person gets mad at me stop you. If things don't seem right, you're getting a strange call, you're getting an email that you don't recognize, slow down and make sure you talk to someone hopefully you can trust or get out of the situation. Because the longer you have this fraud going on, the more problems you're going to have. So you do want to make sure that you're taking your time whenever you start to make investment decisions or once again get some strange calls. Some other more investment related items here that aren't necessarily fraud. We want to make sure you've got some savings built up. This is where an advisor will want to take advantage of maybe the savings you have and try and get every dollar. You need to keep at least 6 months of living expenses before you really start looking at pure investments. Now, that's a rule of thumb. Usually, 3 to 6 months is what we'll say in the industry. Based on your income, your expenses, maybe you need closer to 12 months. Maybe on the shorter end of 3 months is reasonable. But you need to have something built up there before you start talking about locking in funds or being invested, where those timeframes are typically longer, 2, 3, 5 years plus. Um, and I know we've kind of said it here, but make sure you understand what you're investing in. That means you should get information from the financial professional, but you should be more than happy to bring in others that maybe aren't on the same page in terms of what you're trying to accomplish, or they might not even understand the investment. But ideally, those people can start to help you make sure you're doing the right things, right? And that financial professional or advisor can help them as well. And that just means being a better informed investor. I think workshops like this to kind of reinforce some of these things, make sure you're watching out for those red flags, obviously will help. But there are a variety of ways people will, advisors and financial professionals will build trust. One of those is what we consider a free lunch seminar. You may have received mailers. I know my parents, who are in their early 70s, have received a lot of these mailers. It's a chance to come out, learn about some sort of financial topic, and get a free steak dinner, right, or a free lunch. And it sounds pretty enticing. Maybe it's even a really nice restaurant in the area. You say, "Well, I'll go and I'll listen to what they have to say, and at the very worst, I get some free food." It's fair enough, but these types of workshops are ripe for some fraudulent behavior, and that's not to say there's problems with all of them by any means. But what we have seen in the past is these workshops are done. People come in. The advisor is pretty good at convincing people whether to have a meeting or that their solution is the one and only solution they should move forward with. And those products aren't always necessarily in the best interest of those that attended. Um, they make decisions too quick. They don't realize what they get themselves into. And a year or two later, they realize, geez, we've got something that really doesn't align with our goals and what we're trying to accomplish. Um, so, once again, that doesn't mean that these workshops aren't beneficial to go to. In fact, I run workshops myself. And while no one's getting a free lunch on this one, we run these and we do provide food, but that's because they're educational in nature. And that's what you hope to see from these workshops and seminars is they're focused on educating you, not on a specific product. There's the red flag that says, we brought you in to talk about investing in retirement, but we're offering this one solution that we think makes sense for you. That's where the red flag should come in on those. And that just comes back to understanding what's there and making sure that the advisor is taking their time in understanding your situation. I know I just berated you with facts here for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes. And I hope some of it has hit a little bit here. And I think the going back to the basics, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And if any of those red flags pop up, that's where you need to slow down and understand what you're looking at. What is this person providing me? And should I be maybe bringing in some others to help me make a decision? But I think Vicky here is going to be able to give you a good idea of what's protected on the bank side here with some of the FDIC insurance considerations.
Thank you, Jesse. Yes, so as you could see on the screen in front of you, I'm on the banking side, so I'm more, I could let you know what is covered by FDIC and what is not covered by the FDIC. So if you were to visit one of our locations, we would be able to give you more information on what is covered by FDIC, but we don't necessarily know much about the others, which is Jesse's profession, and he would be able to discuss that more with you. So, for instance, checking accounts, savings accounts, money markets, and certificate of deposits are all covered by the FDIC insurance. What is not covered are stocks or bonds, mutual fund shares, life insurance policies, annuities, municipal securities, safe deposit boxes. We would be able to help you with the safe deposit box at the actual location, but it is not covered. Whatever is in it is not covered by the FDIC insurance. And losses resulting from theft, fraud, or robbery. That is also not covered by the FDIC. If you go to the next screen, Jesse, you also are probably aware the FDIC coverage was 100,000 years back. Now it is $250,000 per person, but it depends on the titling of the accounts and who is on the account, how many people you have on the account. Some of the accounts, depending if you are it's a single account, so there's only one person on there, it would be covered for $250,000. If it's a joint account, that, each person, it's $250,000. Revocable trust, it depends on the beneficiaries and certain retirement accounts as well. So each, depending on the title, they are not combined. So each one at each institution is separately insured. For instance, here at Wintrust, we have different charters, so each one individually insures the 250. So it is not combined. But each institution its own. So like Chase, if you had money at Chase and you had money at Wintrust, those would be completely separate, insured. There is a lot of information about the FDIC. If you go to fdic.gov-deposits, and there's also a really neat feature on the website. It's called EDIE, and that's EDIE. You could actually put the people that you are planning on putting on the account. So let's say that it would be me and my husband on the account, and then we would put our daughters as beneficiaries, and you list each one, owner, myself, the second joint owner would be my husband, beneficiaries, and you put the amount of money that you would like to put in the account, and it will let you know if it's going to be insured or not. So you could play around with it. It actually breaks it down for you to make sure that your funds are covered by the FDIC insurance. So those are really good sites to go to if you would like more information about it. And I think that is pretty much it in a nutshell. Are there any questions for Jesse or I?
I have a question about that broker check website.
Yeah.
So could I just go on there and give that person a red dot, or does it go through, like, are there checks and balances within it?
No, so it does need to be some sort of usually arbitration that someone will go through to get that red dot on there.
Mhm.
So it's more where it'll typically happen is an investor, once again feels misled or maybe lost money in an investment that they were told it would be different. They'll usually go to the firm, file an official complaint. That will start the proceedings. And they don't even necessarily have to be at fault in terms of the advisor doesn't have to be at fault. There can be
Sure.
just a misunderstanding or et cetera, but that's how that mark will get on there.
Okay.
So there's a variety of things that will happen in between, someone having a complaint and them actually getting a mark. But no, you can't just, hop on there like
Yeah.
Facebook and say, yep,
Yeah.
they didn't
That's
like
good
me.
to know. Yeah. I was thinking like, oh, that seems not great, but yeah, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Feel free to type a question in the chat if you'd like as well. And we can answer it that way too, if there are any.
I'll mention one other thing just while we're waiting for any additional questions. Vicki talked about FDIC. When you do have investment accounts, you do have separate protections under what's called SIPC. And while it is not affiliated with FDIC, it does provide some protections for cash in investment accounts, as well as for the securities that are inside. So that would be the stocks, bonds, etc. It doesn't protect against a loss, meaning if a stock or a bond were to drop in value, but there are protections there as well. So that is something that if you're looking at your accounts, how am I protected on the bank side? How am I protected with my investments that are out there as well? There are a couple layers there to be aware of.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, is there anything else you guys would like to touch upon? No. All right. Well, I just want to thank both Jesse and Vicky. This has been really informative. I really appreciate your time. And we hope to see you guys again soon. I know there's a money market talk coming up. The next talk is Thursday, November 14th at 11 a.m. And that talk is on credit score and repairing your credit score. So please keep an eye out for that as well. All right, well, I'm going to stop this recording and then we will have it up on our YouTube series for everyone to enjoy later. And yeah, I just want to thank you guys again on behalf of the NSYMCA.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Have a wonderful day, guys.
Have a
You
good
too.
day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.